decided to, I started an organization called the Jamaican Youth Project. I went back home to Jamaica where my roots were from. I didn't know until 10 years ago. In any event, I fell in love with the kids that were wearing no shoes, that are in abject poverty, that live in the remote parts of the mountain. And I felt that I could go and make a contribution.
Without you, I remember myself, my name. Forgot about all you tried to change. Familiar was the sound of your voice as I continue to walk on by. It has been a year and now I'm living.
Welcome to the DO Boxing Show. I'm your host, Dameon Okposio, and I'm here with Coach William Grant. And you may have seen older episodes when we did information on Camp Oneness. Well, that was Coach Grant. So for those of you that don't know, and to give a little bit of a history, can you tell us a little bit about your boxing history in Canada, and what you've done, just to give people a small idea?
Yeah, basically, I started off in the military, and once I got out of the military, I wanted to do something that involved helping kids and just giving back, especially in the community I came from. So I started teaching boxing, and that would have been just over 30 years ago, and I enjoyed it so much that I made a commitment to say that not only did I enjoy it, that I was going to produce some high-level athletes. So then I had to intensify the commitment that I made.
Okay.
And really focus on the development, because, you know, whether it's going from a white belt to a black belt, or a non-fighter to a championship fighter, you have to be totally committed to the long-term vision, because as you know, especially in today's modern world, everybody's living in the moment.
Right.
Whereas I've always been a long-term vision. So that's how I started, right fresh out of the military. And that started with me in Border City in Windsor, Ontario, where I took a drugstore and gutted it and turned it into a boxing gym and started doing what I do.
Excellent. So you've worked and coached at numerous locations, and bring us up to Camp Oneness, because we got to visit there, and it was a great and unique kind of program that you created there. So tell us about Camp Oneness and its evolution now.
Okay, well, that's a very good question, only in that I started some programming in the hood where I grew up, Alexandra Park, which we're actually going to get into that a little bit later. But the point that I'm making here is I started that programming, and I realized at one particular point that a lot of the kids that grew up in my environment, or that are growing up there now, or grew up when I did, they needed a retreat. They needed some place where they could go that would get them out of that concrete jungle where everybody was always chasing, you know, things, because wealth was all around them and they had none. So it just got into my heart and into my spirit that I needed to find a safe place where I could sequester these kids and just let them get something holistic and organic in their spirit, because everything that they were doing was very urban and very raw.
Okay. And I think that that's a great element, and it opens people's minds, and you used a lot of boxing, I guess, to form a lot of the lesson plans that you were doing out there?
Yeah, because by my life standards, I've always seen boxing as a metaphor. Mm-hmm. And when I think about my childhood and I think about my siblings, I know that a lot of times people go to different levels within themselves that are not positive, that they're very negative, because they give up in their self-esteem. And like, I have 8 sisters, I'm the youngest of 14 kids, and watching my sisters being abused by men and with low self-esteem, and you know, those things always puzzled me. So I always felt that through self-defense that you could deal with those particular issues, because it's one thing to have low self-esteem, but it's another thing for somebody to give you confidence.
Okay.
And to be more specific, is what I'm saying to you is that boxing gives you a foundation to believe that you can get places where you've never been before. Because the perfect example is when you get knocked down, you need to get back up. You know, and if you have a bad day today, who's to say you can't have a good day tomorrow if you train and discipline yourself? So, you know, for my money, boxing has always been a metaphor, and more importantly, to summarize what I'm thinking, and maybe I'm not putting it out there right, but my intent is that it's a metaphor only because my focus has always been to create a champion of life, not necessarily a champion in the ring. Of course, I say, why am I going to spend all my time training this athlete unless I can progress to have them the best in the world? I never really had much reverence for the Ontario or Canadian or European title. I always wanted to see that athlete on a world stage. But that doesn't realistically happen. But in the process of trying to achieve that, you can instill certain values in a child or a youth or even a young adult that can make them deal with the highs and lows of life in general.
100% self-mastery and confidence building, like you said before. So what happened with Camp Oneness then? And what is the project that you're going to be going to next? Is this kind of an evolution of Camp Oneness, or is this a new project?
Actually, I personally believe that Camp Oneness has just become a bigger platform. It's become broader. Because what actually happened with Camp Oneness is I went through the gambit of a lot of different agencies, whether it was Toronto Community Housing, Boys and Girls, you know, just a whole lot of different agencies that visited the farm, and I did the work that I had to do. But in the process of doing that, because of the financial outline of what I was required to do and the money that was coming in, it became very strenuous on me personally, and I got to a point where I felt I had come full circle. Okay. And I couldn't afford to marginalize my own life for the betterment of others, because as you get older, you believe you deserve more comforts, not less. Right? When I was young, that was okay. I could rough it, but I just felt I come full circle, and I wanted to do something bigger and more impactful, because one thing about myself and even you being an officer and me being an ex-soldier, is we understand the regimentation of life and consistency. So when you're dealing with agencies or organizations that don't do things in a timely manner, and you still have responsibilities that aren't going away, it becomes very challenging and very strenuous.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the irony is that my sister kept convincing me to come to Jamaica and learn about my history, and when I went there, and I was in the most remote, impoverished areas, something happened to me there, and I realized, hey, why can't I do what I'm doing in Canada, in Jamaica, where, you know, I'm in the remote parts. That means you have a lot more raw talent. And from a coach's perspective, what most people don't realize is that where I'm going to, Akapong in St. Elizabeth Parish in Jamaica, it's 2,000 feet up in the air, which means that the air is thinner, and that means that the athletes or the people that you're working with, their cardio and their ability to learn it's definitely at a clear advantage. Those are things that I look at as the mad scientist, because I think you and I both agree that the term's not used much, but boxing is a sweet science, and it is a metaphor for me. But more importantly, Camp Oneness is just moving to a different location and focusing on younger kids that are a lot more marginalized, and you know, you can do so much more with the resources that I have in Jamaica than I could do in Canada, because as we know, specifically in Ontario, the cost of living is high.
The cost of living is very high, and you know what, I'm glad that you brought that up, because just because you're born here doesn't mean that everything has to happen here. You got to go where the opportunity is, and when people make things difficult, then if the environment is just difficult, you can always look outside. I think a lot of people are very romantic about keeping things here, even with athletes fighting in front of the hometown crowd.
Right.
You know what, if you need to, get on the road or look at the, you know, the world is so small nowadays anyways. Look for where the opportunity is. So that being said, you're going to Jamaica, and this is going to be taking a lot of the principles of Camp Oneness there. You're looking for items to go down there with. As you said, you're going to be in impoverished areas. So can you tell us about what you have in place to to get items down there?
Yeah, I would love to. First and foremost, one of the things that struck me when I was in the remote mountains of Okapong, where my actual ancestral background comes from 1796, when my forefather landed in Halifax, Nova Scotia. I did not know this. And so going there and seeing children without shoes and seeing people that don't have enough items or toys or things to play with, I mean, it exists all around the world. But it resonated more with me because it represented my history and my lineage. So I took it to heart. And with that in mind, now I've started a specific youth clothing, shoe, and toy drive, because I believe that any child without shoes, whether it's in the bush or in the street, that can be changed if somebody puts a concentrated effort, and I'm prepared to do that.
Okay, great.
And, you know, so back to the point of what you asked was, what arrangements have I made? So I grew up in Alexandra Park, which is in the Dundas-Spadina area, and there's a community center there called Alexandra Park. And I've made arrangements with the executive director to use that as a drop-off point.
Okay.
And what I'm trying to encourage the viewer of this video to understand is that we only have a short window, because I'm getting a sea container in May, and I'm going to start shipping my own personal items to create the space which will be the Jamaican Youth Project. So we've set a date, and it's April 24th, between the hours of 2 and 8 p.m., where you can drop items off at 105 Grange Court in Alexandra Park, which is it's just southwest of Dundas and Spadina. It's a well-known community. It's been there for a very long time. So anybody that's interested in that, you can either contact Dameon or myself and get the specific information in case you don't get an answer or response. We're easy to get in touch with, either through Messenger or Facebook or email. And I would love for you to come down and get these toys and these shoes and these clothing to these kids. And the last thing I want to say about that is we're not just giving these items away, they're being incentivized. In other words, I intend to utilize the clothing, the shoes, and the toys as a kind of like a bartering tool. In other words, any kid that wants to come to the gym and is consistent in his performance, he should be rewarded for that. Any kid that wants to do something in the community, whether it's pick up garbage or plant a garden or do something, there should be incentives to keep them so they can take pride in what they do.
100%.
So that's why this clothing drive is particularly important to me.
So if you have any gently used clothing, shoes, or toys, April 24th is the date. If you can't get down there, try and coordinate with someone between 2 p.m. to 8 p.m. And that's going to be at the
Alexandra Park Community Centre,
which is going to be located at?
It's 105 Grange Court,
And
which
that's
is
in Toronto?
Yes, it's in Toronto. It's southwest of Spadina and Dundas.
And I think that's it's a great cause. And if you have any of those items hanging around, which most of us do, put them together and it'll go to a great cause.
Most assuredly.
Remember, if you have any questions related to boxing, send us a message through Twitter at DOKPOSIO, through email okposio@hotmail.com, and don't forget to subscribe to get every episode of the DO Boxing Show. Thanks again for tuning into this episode, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Bye.
Like,